Hey, afternoon. Coming to you, Drew and I coming to you here. We'll go ahead and advance our slide here. Welcome to our webinar, 2021 Learnings in 2022 Look Ahead. Drew and I will be talking to you for the next, 40-ish minutes, half hour. We'll see how long it goes. About, where we've been and where we're going to go in the year ahead. So, Drew, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, like Jason said, I'm Drew. I have now transitioned this last year from being a systems administrator to the sales executive. So instead of answering help desk tickets, I'm the one going out and promoting our brand. I've been doing it now for, let's see, what's the date? It's been since January 1st. So I'm like a month and a half in, and I got to say, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, Drew has been pretty amazing. He speaks our value very well, and it makes me super excited to have him in this new role. My name is Jason Slagel. I am now the president of CWR, which is a new role as of 1/1 for myself.
Woo!
Also, yeah, it's a little bit of change going on here at CWR. But we're looking forward to, like, we've been trying to do these webinars about every 6 weeks, and we were coming through, and I'm like, man, there a lot of stuff happened. Like 2020 seemed like, I don't know, 5 years, or 2020 seemed like 5 years. 2021 felt like a decade. Like, so much stuff to unpack that happened in that year. And so we'll see if 2022 is a century, or if we skate through it being a normal sized year. So we got a few things we're going to cover today. Pretty loose agenda. Try not to kill people with slides in these things. We're going to start by taking a look back at 2021. Like, where were we? What did we have going on? What were some of the trends we saw in the industry? Then we'll look at current events. There's a number of things going on right now. Some big football game happened last Sunday that may be relevant to the tech space. I can't remember what it is. Sports ball.
Yeah.
And there's just a bunch of things going on, and then we'll make some predictions. We got some space at the end here for Drew and I both to make some predictions in 2022. And if we do this again next year, Drew, I think we should go back and rewatch this and see how many. Like, we should start this out by indicating how many of our predictions for 2022 actually came true, right? I think that would be a good spot to do it. And if there are any questions, we'll hold them at the end here. And this is a format here that I don't really expect a lot of questions on, but feel free, anyone out there, to ask us anything. So let's move forward. Let's take a look back at 2021, the year that was a decade. So, Drew, what do you think about COVID here? You think this is still a thing?
Yeah, COVID is absolutely still a thing, and I think we still need to be careful. But what we're seeing, especially with the Omicron variant here recently, there was this huge spike that happened like right around December into February, right? Like everybody got it. I had it. I think some people in our office had it. And it was a spike for a couple of weeks there. Everybody got it, and then now, for the most part, we're all okay, and we're starting to see things, relatively speaking, returning to normal, at least in the Toledo area. And I gotta say, COVID was awful, but I am really excited to be back in public and seeing friends and family again. It was a long couple of years, and so I think everybody is feeling the weight of that, and I'm definitely excited to get back to normal. I know in terms of the office setting, there have been a lot of people who've been trying to adopt this new, like, work from home / come into the office thing. And we're seeing a lot of companies go into this like hybrid thing, and us included. Jason's in the office right now, and you can see behind me my little home office in my basement. And that's kind of what CNWR has been doing. We have people who are working from home. We have people working in the office. And I think people generally come in on like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. But for the most part, we've been adopting this hybrid schedule. And I think this year specifically, we're getting back to the point where, is it time for us to start asking everybody to come back to work? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah, I briefly dropped, and I'll do it again here, right? So I'm at the office, hiding behind my green screen here. I'll bring back up. Yeah, it's really interesting. We had started, we slow started. We took this very seriously, and in most cases, we were holding our employees to even stricter standards than the CDC were. It's like I'm to the point now where it's like, if you're sick, just don't come to work. Like, don't worry about it, right? Like, I'd rather you not come get the rest of us sick. And pretty sure that our COVID bout, I had it, my whole family got it. It came from the kids, I'm pretty sure. I I feel fairly confident saying we haven't had office to office spread here because we've been
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah.
And, September, October last year, we're like, okay, case numbers are down. Everyone start coming back to the office. We started with 2 days a week. Some groups were up to 3, and we had some people that are here almost every day. And is Omicron cranked back up? I think shortly before Christmas, shortly before Christmas, I'm like, okay, guys, like maybe guys and gals, maybe we need to start being remote again for a bit. And for a couple of weeks there, I would say from like middle of December through, I don't know, even just last week, our office manager here was quite lonely because I was coming in some days, most days, except the 2 weeks when I was at home with COVID. But not very many people have been coming in, and we're trying to figure out what that looks like. I'm starting to see we are in downtown Toledo, uptown Toledo. We're in the same building as Toledo Spirits and Bellwether right now. I just bought a building in downtown Toledo that we're hoping to move into at the end of March. And just generally, my feel is that we're starting to see the central business district of downtown open back up a little bit, right? A bunch of restaurants that were closed for a long time because there's no one down here for lunch are starting to open back up, and you're starting to see people. So hopefully, as the weather breaks, we'll start to see an end to this. And I know with our new building, we're probably going to ask most of the office to come back in. Spend a lot of money at a building for us to all be together and do great things. Would very much like to see it used.
As long as we put go-karts in the basement, I'm okay with it.
I do want to get, Toledo's got those scooters. I was thinking about buying a couple of scooters just for company use, right? Like you take them out for lunch, but go-karts in the basement would be fun. Okay, cool. So moving on here. Another big thing that we had in 2021 was part shortages. Drew, I'm going to let you take this one completely.
Okay, sounds good. So it was a real challenge for us last year to get any kind of hardware out to our clients, whether that was desktops, laptops, monitors. We had battery backups. There was networking equipment. I mean, you name it. This stuff was just impossible to get your hands on because of the chip shortage. But even outside of our space, even places like Best Buy and these other tech giants, there was a point in time that I went into Best Buy and they said that they were at 40% capacity. I mean, you looked around and all of the shelves were just empty. I mean, whether you were buying a computer, a TV, if you were going to buy a new car, anything that had a computer chip in it was hard to find, and it was expensive if you could find it. So I'm a gamer, so like GPU, graphics processing units, oh my gosh, people have been scalping those game consoles.
But is that some of that's probably because of crypto too, though, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, especially on the GPU front.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one of the nice things that's come from this is that all of these manufacturers are trying to double down and produce more. And I think there are some people who are speculating that we're going to have an overabundance of chips for stuff in 2023, which honestly, with how the past few years have gone, I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah, we're going to see an overcorrection here. I would agree with that. Okay, cool. So moving on. And actually just remembered I intended to drop screen share here, but I'm really bad at that. So I will here shortly when it makes sense to do it. So let's talk about security. I mean, I can't remember. Was there any big security news in 2021, Drew? I
don't know. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the common words that was bouncing around there was cybersecurity burnout. And in 2020 and 2021, there were so many things that happened. And we witnessed so many crippling vulnerabilities that it got to the point that, for some of us, it was really easy to look past this, right? Like, oh my gosh, it's another thing that's coming out. What can I really do to stay on top of this? But admittedly, I have the 1,000-foot level view of all of it. I was just the guy on the other end of it looking and saying, holy cow, there are so many things coming out that we need to address. So I want to pass it back over to Jason for him to tell you more of the specifics of some of the things that we saw last year.
On the weeds. I mean, it's I'm looking at this list here of things I picked to use to do this, and You got things like Print Nightmare and Cigarette and some other things that I'm pretty
Oh,
sure were. It's Print Nightmare for sure. It's like a
that sent
recurring
chills down my
dream.
spine.
Yeah, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, we're still dealing with the fallouts of Print Nightmare. It is definitely a recurring dream. But we started out the year, I think it was pretty early, June-ish, first half of the year for sure. We had this big breach of the Colonia pipeline by a group called Revil out of Russia. They got a password leak out of the off the dark web, and they got in and they held this pipeline for ransom for it was a couple weeks. And it's funny because we talk about part shortages and stuff, but this caused a real huge issue. There were gas shortages in large parts of the country, ironically, not because Colonial couldn't pump products. The pipeline was operational, could have shipped products like literally at any time, but if you're a company, you got to be able to bill. And so while Colonial never lost the ability to actually pump, and there was never any threat to the actual ability to pump gasoline, they lost the ability to bill for it. So they shut it down. Shortly after that, I mean, I think this was just honestly a couple weeks later, we had JBS, a huge meat supplier. And I think in both of these cases, they ended up actually paying. I know for a fact JBS did. Colonial has been a little more secretive about what actually happened there. I do believe that almost all of the money that was paid by JBS after the decryption was somehow clawed back by the FBI. And, I'm a little bit of foreshadowing there because I think we're going to have a discussion about for sure about crypto and potentially about how money laundering with crypto is really hard here in a little bit. So we'll foreshadow a little bit here.
I'm excited for that one.
Yeah. Then, so as a guy in cybersecurity, man, it's been a tough year. We're going into the 4th of July weekend, right? So I'm actually off. I'm off work. It is the Friday before the 4th. We're camping, right? My wife and I, we love to camp. I'm at the house getting the camper ready to tow out. We're camping locally. We were just in Stony Ridge. But I start seeing these news reports in a bunch of other people I know, and we're a managed service provider, and I start seeing these reports in some vendors such as Hunters that I really trust and work closely with. It just wasn't good, and so about 2:30 p.m. and I know the exact time of this one, about 2:30 p.m. To 4:30 p.m. on July 2nd, going into the holiday weekend, Revil, the same hacking group from the first two, went ahead and cryptoed 60, and then ended up being Kaseya Partners. And these were full managed service provider level breaches, right? So they encrypted every single one of their clients. Impacted a grocery store chain in like the Netherlands. I think they were down for close to a week, just couldn't operate. Impacted a whole bunch of managed service providers. And I believe that the final count I saw was like 15 to 16,000 total encrypted systems, impacting millions of dollars it was 15 to 16,000 customers, impacting millions of systems, and costing millions of dollars downtime. So this was a big deal, right? This was a worst case scenario for the managed service provider space. And then at the end of the year, right around Christmas again, and it's no accident that these things tend to happen close to weekends.
I'm seeing a trend.
Or holidays. Yeah. A couple days before Christmas, I think it was December 21st, I'd like to say, this Log4j thing when it came out, right? And this one wasn't threat actors. This was a pseudo accident. Maybe the initial leak of it seems to have come from China. The bug had been reported to Apache and fixed a couple of days or maybe even a month earlier. And I don't know if it just showed up in a source tree or somebody discovered it, but it hit the news on that was a Friday. It was Thursday night going into Friday morning. I work closely again with Huntress and a bunch of others, and had to enter that day facing what I was going to do. Was I going to have my security researcher hat on, or was I going to have my MSP hat on? And we actually, in the end, ended up delegating much of the day-to-day, what we had to do for our own clients, using some guidance from me to Matt and his great team that runs our MSP side here, which allowed me to take a step up to the 10,000 foot view and help out the industry as a whole. and a bunch of our vendors got to release a really cool tool with the Huntress team to allow people to test Log4j. I think I was one of the first people to report that some of the VMware components were vulnerable. And, we're still seeing, it's almost 2 months later now. Yeah, it's almost 2 months. And we're still seeing a lot of blowback from that one, and, a lot of follow on. And it goes back, a lot of this goes back to what you said, at the very beginning of this discussion that we started on here, which is brownout or blackout for us, especially security researchers, right? It's like we had this Log4j vulnerability, and then literally 2 days later, there was another one, right? And then there was another one, and everyone is running around at like DEFCON 5, and it's really hard when you start looking at that stuff to realize that not every one of these rises to the level of this is fine, right? Like, or of the world is ending, right? Like, we got a bit of that going on there where, oh yeah, nope, the world is burning around me. So I do some of my own content that I released on my channel. I had a nice discussion with Tom Lawrence up at Lawrence Systems just about mental health in our industry and in the IT industry in general as results of that. So that's kind of where we've been. And it's a perfect segue into where we're going. And I'll go ahead and I'll start this one out. So a thing happened, and
add insult to injury.
well, the 3 of the 4 things we talked about in that last section were a group called Revel out of Russia, and as it turns out, on the 14th, they got arrested. Police in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Leningrad, and Lepisk. I can't say that word. They raided 25 addresses, raided up to 14 individuals, and they recovered over $5 million in rubles and crypto, and 600,000 US dollars in cash, 500,000 euro, and they had a bunch of cars. So the guy, I'm going to drop screen share here for a second. Because I got something fun to show you. I mean, depending on if you think it's fun or not. Let's see. So the leader of Revel, the guy that was like in charge of running it, he literally had. Let me go ahead and reshare this here too, as soon as I figure out where my Zoom went. There it is. So the guy in charge of Revel had, believe it or not, and I can't even make this stuff up, like literally a fleet of Lamborghinis. So, he had a yellow one. He had this weird looking multicolored one, but there are definitely videos of this guy, just like sitting out in the streets, like very openly in Russia, doing donuts in the middle of a square in like one of his, essentially fleet of Lamborghinis. And that's pretty brazen. Not gonna lie,
to say the least.
pretty ballsy. So these people, obviously they thought they were untouchable, and not to drag politics into it all, but there's in the infosec space, there's some speculation that there's some pressure saying like, hey, these are the bad guys and we'll arrest them, but if you go against us on something like Ukraine, then this will be the last ones you ever get, right? So there's some speculations that there's some backside dealings doing there. It was publicly documented that the US was somehow involved in these operations. So it's interesting. And we got a couple more, I think, along the lines of there, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you, Drew. So this just came in today, like literally came in, I don't know, 30 minutes, so I didn't have time to make a slide for it. So I get emails from CISA, right, via various organizations that I'm a member of as a cybersecurity researcher.
For the less technical of us, Jason, what is CISA? What do they do?
The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So they are the government agency that is chartered with or responsible for ensuring cybersecurity for our infrastructure and other things. So like these guys they're the ones that handle security for critical infrastructure. And increasingly we're starting to see people like us, managed service providers, viewed as critical infrastructure, because a large hit on a managed service provider can cripple a lot of small businesses, right, which are really the bread and butter of the US economy.
So what you're saying is that if they say something, we should probably listen.
Oh yeah, this is
Maybe
pretty
just
big.
a little bit.
Right. So on top of, this whole Revel thing, now we're starting to see that we've got some state sponsored actors targeting cleared defense contractor networks. It's pretty scary stuff. It's funny. My wife and I are watching a show called The Americans right now that was on FX, and it's like, this is like literally a headline I would have expected to see right out of that show, where you've got, threat actors or spies, essentially super smart computer people coming in and trying to steal defense contractor data to get US classified information. So, it's super prudent, I think, on everybody right now to be diligent, right, and pay attention to what's going on in the world, because this is an increasing problem. So we'll go back to the slide deck here. Kick one over to you. I feel like I've been talking forever. It's Drew's turn.
My turn, coming back.
There you go, Drew. Let's do it.
The other thing that we're seeing now in 2022, I guess this kind of happened in 2021, but people are implementing it more. Windows 11 is out, which is super funny. Jason and I were talking about this beforehand. Microsoft said that Windows 10 was going to be the last iteration of Windows that we were going to see. And of course, here it is, Windows 11. Who would have guessed, right? But Windows 11 was a free upgrade. So if you have a computer that you bought before 2014 that allows you to use TPM 2.0, which I won't bore you with the bits and the bytes there, but essentially, if you bought your computer after 2014, you're able to use Windows 11, which is really cool. For me, I've already updated my home computer that I'm using right now. I've updated my work laptop. I gotta say, it was really great. Not very much like the transition from Windows 7 to Windows 8, right? A lot of times when there are new iterations of OSs that come out, I'll be honest, they're generally dumpster fires. They're super buggy. People hate them, and it's generally a mess for a while until they get their bearings. But I gotta say, I love Windows 11. It was super weird because I was talking to Matt about this too, who's now our VP. We're clicking around and we're working, and we're like, man, it seems like it's faster, but that doesn't make sense. But I was reading an article before we did the webinar, and I guess there's some kind of new memory management that Windows 11 uses that prioritizes what's open on the screen. I don't know how that works, but we were saying how it seemed faster and it seemed snappier when we were using it. So yeah, Windows 11 is great. If you haven't upgraded already and you have the ability to, I would recommend doing it if you're comfortable doing so. But I've been a big fan.
I will say, if you're a client of ours and you haven't upgraded yet, please work with us.
Yeah, please don't do it without telling us first.
Drew will be coming back to the help desk if he advises you all to upgrade to Windows 11.
My bad.
Without
Shame
discussing. On me. Discussing. Yeah, I haven't. Full disclosure and transparency, I'm a Mac user, right? So I'm doing this for my MacBook. So I haven't actually used Windows 11. I'm a little suspect because we have a pattern here, right? Like Windows 95, Windows 3.1 was kind of a turd. Windows 95 was good or okay. Windows 98 was pretty good. Windows ME, which I think was the next one in the desktop client, dumpster fire, total dumpster fire. And then from there, you went to Windows 7, I think came after ME, and Windows 7 was good.
Was ME in 2000? Was that the same thing?
Yeah. So 2000 was like the business focused version. And I think M7 was the first one where they basically combined them two, I believe. So it was one.
Oh no, and we missed XP. So there was XP, and then we had 7.
Yeah. You're right. It was XP, then Millennium, then 7. Yeah.
Yes.
And then 8 was the dumpster fire.
Ugh.
And then 10's been pretty good. So, following the pattern, I don't know. I'm kind of afraid of 11, right? Because it's like every other version just isn't good. But we've had, I think, we've had feature updates of 10 that haven't been great, right? So maybe we've just continued the pattern there, and 11 actually will be good. But for sure, they have done some work with the memory management and some under the hood stuff that has made it a little bit snappier. So moving on.
All right.
Yeah. How are we feeling about this, man?
This was the one that I was super excited for because it's like this super cool pop culture thing, but it's also it plays into what it is that we're trying to discuss today in terms of security and best practices. So this was great. So if you watch the Super Bowl, pretty much every commercial that came out there was either about crypto, electric cars, or alcoholic seltzers. So it was really cool. And we were chuckling about this beforehand that like, we're finally the target demographic, right? Like we're finally the ones being marketed to. I actually, I saw a meme beforehand that said something to the effect of, wow, it's so cool that, they're not bringing in these old artists for the halftime show, like the Rolling Stones, they're finally, doing stuff that's new and relevant. And then we realized that all of that was popular 30 years ago. Right. So, so it's funny. So we're like the old people now, but anyways, if you watched the Super Bowl, the one thing that you undoubtedly saw was this floating QR code that was on the screen, and it was a minute long. And if you didn't actually scan it, I'll fill you in. It was Coinbase, Coinbase.com. So it was an ad that was essentially supposed to get you to scan the code and then sign up for this service. And by the way, Coinbase is it's another platform for you to buy and exchange cryptocurrency on, right? So this was cool and it was cute and people thought it was funny, but the other darker side to that is that this is another manipulative tactic that hackers and bad actors use to get your information. So if there's a QR code posted somewhere, or this manifests itself too, like if you get a text on your phone, it's just this like ambiguous link that you get that you're supposed to click on and maybe enter information into. And again, this was kind of fun because it was aired during the Super Bowl, but there was another side of it that was like this really big company is normalizing this like really sketchy practice, and it's something that's actually considered to be like unsafe and unreasonable for you to do, right? So and I I guess I should say too, I did scan the QR code. I did get my $15 of Bitcoin. And I did it without thinking. And then I realized, being in the MSP space, I was like, that was probably not the smartest thing that I've ever done.
I may or may not be gathering all my buddies to figure out how we can pool up enough money to buy a QR code that does naughty things during some event. Right? Like this is just generally there's been a bunch of webinars and a bunch of talk in our literally in our space about how bad of a practice this is. And we've kind of, restaurants with COVID have normalized this habit of just using a QR code on a table. And my one buddy Matt Lee, he went through, and him and I think Dom Kirby, they went through and printed a bunch of barcodes that basically what they would do is they took the original restaurant barcode. They created a redirector that would just capture any information they could get about your phone, make, model, right? Like all this other stuff that you could grab just via headers and stuff. And then it would forward you to the original web page.
Oh, man.
They were printing these out and they were just sticking them over the QR codes on menus and stuff, right? So, now they're in the back end and they're just gathering all these data about patron. Like, do they most of them use, iPhones or Android or things like that, or you can even take people to fake web pages. No, there's so much you can do with QR codes that really shouldn't be a thing that you scan on any device that you care about, right? Like it's I'll scan them. I have a scanner that won't actually actively do anything. It will pop up and tell me what the code does. So I'll scan one and then look at it and then decide if I'm going to click on the link or do what action it takes. But honestly, the same thing applies to things like USB drives. I mean, it may be fun to have a USB drive, right? Or find one. It's like, oh, I found a USB drive. Well, what if that USB drive I plugged in did a number of naughty things? I think I sent it in a chat we had internally earlier that I was going to start just dropping USB killers out there, right? And USB killers are basically they're devices that have a giant capacitor in them. You charge them up, and then somebody plugs them into their computer, and they trigger, and they'll just fry it. They just cook it. Computer's done for. There's that. There's you think of a USB drive, and it's got the data piece of it on there. But did you know that a USB drive can also be a keyboard?
What?
Right, so yeah. So what if you plug a USB drive in, and on top of showing up as USB drive, it does like Windows R to go to run, and then just enters a URL and sends you to a URL with malware on it, right? Like these are all things that aren't even hard. There's an entire toolkit out there to create these sort of things. And I don't know, pop culture reference here. I don't know if anyone ever watched Mr. Robot. But in one of the very first episodes of Mr. Robot, they actually got into it was the girl's computer, right? Or it wasn't Remy's, it was the blonde girl's computer.
Yeah, his friend.
Via CD that some artist just gave out in the streets of New York. It was like
a street rapper.
Yeah,
right?
Correct. And dude, I'll tell you what, walking around the streets of New York, those street rappers are giving you music all the time. I think there's several of them potentially in my backpack, and it's like, I'm not putting that thing in my computer. Like, I just don't trust you. So
and now it's scan my QR code and go to my page, right?
Scan me a QR code. And so I think this segues kind of us into a general discussion, and I couldn't figure out what to put on a slide for this. So I'm just going to drop the share. And we can talk. I think it segues us into a general where we're currently at with crypto, because I feel like we can't talk about current events or predictions without having some sort of crypto talk in there. So I'm gonna let you start this discussion here, Drew. We had a pretty good back and forth banter about this before we started when we were in the green room. So I want to rehab some of that and kind of relive it because I thought it was really good. So go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, it was fun. I hope we can replicate it here for everybody to see. So yeah, going into this year, the buzzwords that everyone is hearing are crypto. We're talking about NFTs, the metaverse, and Web3. These are these big buzzwords that are buzzing in the tech world, but it's also kind of making itself known in the mainstream media, right? And I think Jason and I have a different view of crypto, right? And this is kind of what we were talking about beforehand that I hope we can redo. But my view of crypto right now, and I'll preface everything that I'm saying with, I have crypto. I mentioned earlier that I have a little bit of Bitcoin from doing the sketchy thing and scanning the QR code. But back when Dogecoin was taking off for a hot minute, I dropped a bunch of money into it, and I bought when it was down, and it spiked up, and I sold immediately. And I'm now sitting at my way too expensive computer setup because of Dogecoin. So I get the draw, I get the appeal. I think it's this really cool short-term tool that we can use to make a quick buck. And I totally did it. And I totally, I was able to benefit. And in the same vein, you can also lose a lot of money in it. It's a very volatile space. We talk about decentralization and the blockchain and all of that, and it's really confusing. And the market is definitely becoming oversaturated with a lot of different coins right now too. Obviously, back in 2007, when Bitcoin was a thing, nobody thought that was ever going to take off. But I think today it's at $45,000 or $47,000 for one Bitcoin. I mean, it took off, and it's becoming a thing. And we're seeing a lot of different retailers actually accept it now too. There are Bitcoin banks in some gas stations around the nation. I mean, it's wild to see how much this has taken off. And that one's a little bit more credible. But then we see other coins too that are just kind of coming out that are more of a joke, right? So I don't know. I'm not going to, invest my retirement savings into crypto just yet. At least that's how I feel about it because of how volatile it is. And there's a side of it too that I feel like there needs to be more regulation. I feel like there needs to be more centralization if we're actually going to adopt it as a real viable thing, right? But I don't know. I'm not totally into crypto yet. I still need to be sold, but I think Jason, I think you have other thoughts on it though too.
Uh,
And I want
like,
you to tell me I'm wrong
yeah,
because I know you're smarter than me. And
no, so there's truth. There's a lot of truth in it, what was said there, right? So, kind of going back to, where we started this, uh, Bitcoin is, and we'll pivot. I've still got one last little news story nugget over here we talked about beforehand here that we'll pivot here into in a second. But Bitcoin, it's been around the longest. It's one of those things that I think I had a wallet, or I was in a pool and probably had, I don't know, 10 of them. And then I lost them because the pool folded. And I wish I had those now. I mean, I'm sitting on like 18,000 ish Dogecoin that I mined, right? Not a huge amount, not a small. I think current value it's like $2,500, $3,000 with a Dogecoin that I mined for like nothing back in the day. But like so many things, there are good actors and there are bad actors, and so generally, I agree with a lot of the concepts behind this. That I believe in some amount of the transparency, and we'll discuss that here in a minute, whether we're transparency or not transparency, transparency or anonymity in transactions, and I believe in. A decentralized currency that isn't controlled by central banks, that isn't beholden to fiscal policy of giant governments, right? Not that it isn't, because people ban it and there are definitely ways to manipulate it. But whenever you have uh, a vessel for investment, I'll call it, you are definitely going to get those people that attempt to take advantage of it, right? This isn't unique to the crypto space. Pump and dump penny stocks have been around forever.
right.
So at the ISP we used to have a fax machine, back when those were still a going concern.
What's
And
that?
yeah, go call your doctor's office, they'll tell you exactly what it is. But we used to get faxes all the time for essentially pump and dump penny stocks, right? And so now, instead of doing pump and dump penny stocks, you've got in this case in particular, you've got two blockchains, we'll call them Ethereum, which is ETH coin, right? Or and then you've got Binance, which is another big blockchain, probably a little less well known than Ethereum is. Ethereum has pretty high fees, so you actually see this there maybe a little bit less. But what happens is you get all these altcoins, right? Altcoin is just a term for an alternative to one of the big mainstream like top 10 market cap coins, and they'll come out and they aren't actually even a blockchain, right? So what they do is a lot of these like cool up and coming crypto companies, they allow you to write what's called a smart contract on their blockchain, and some of the work that is done in that blockchain basically runs a program in the blockchain that is a smart contract, and it's really, really cool and really, really has a lot of potential. But what these bad people do is they basically just mint another coin on top of this other coin's blockchain, right? And so my friend Wes Spencer did a whole video on this on YouTube, where we have this running joke where he is running for dictator and I'm running for vice dictator with him, and so he created dictator coin. He minted 10 trillion dictator coin during this video. He set up a liquidity pool. He set up all the things to make it tradable, right? You can sell on Pancake Swap, I think it is, which is one of the exchanges. You can buy and sell dictator coin. And so what you're starting to see with a lot of these meme coins, and I think some of the Shibu, Dogecoin alternatives, Moon Coin, there's a bunch of them with
To the moon.
names.
We've heard that all too much last year.
They aren't even really coins. They don't have their own blockchain like Doge does. They're just smart contracts based on one of the other platforms, and so they're all just marketing hype, right? They don't have any real backed work that gets done or anything going for them. So they're the modern equivalent to me of a penny stock that somebody's pump and dumping. You'll get, and he covers some of this in his video. You'll get they'll hire somebody, they'll pay $200 for somebody on Cameo to record some, B-list celebrity, to record a 2-minute video talking about how much they love this coin, and they'll market the hell out of it. And so they're only looking at a couple percent, they 1,000% raise, which I mean is more than a couple. You get 1,000% range in the value of this thing, and they just sell it. They own all of it that they haven't put in the liquidity pool.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah, and they just sell it all and they're out, right? So as long as people are willing to buy it, they can sell it at whatever value people are willing to pay. So they pump the hype train, and they're selling the initial basically the initial coin offering, and these people are scamming people on the ICO. I don't think that really devalues, in my eyes, where this is going as a trend, right? Like but I think it's something that needs to be carefully watched. And it kind of segues us into this, last piece of this that I want to talk about before we get on to some predictions here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, because this was the second half, I think, of a really good discussion Drew and I were having. And this was a news thing, right? So this was last week. I was down at a conference, a security conference in Tampa, and this news hit while we were down there, that the Justice Department, basically, they seized $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin tied to a hack of Bitfinex, which was
do I need to say B as in billion? That is a lot of money.
Billion. It's 192,000 coins they got back. It's down here. They recovered 94,000 out of 120 that were stolen, right? They were only worth 70 million at the time that they were stolen. But they actually trace this back to a couple somewhere in upstate New York or in Manhattan or somewhere in New York. So those people are done for, right? Like that is huge. And Drew, you had some really interesting discussion and thoughts when we started talking about this. You want to start to revisit those a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, and that's the thing is, and I'll kind of go back to what I was saying before. I don't think afraid is the right word to use, because it's not. There needs to be some kind of centralization around Bitcoin in general, because at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to go out and purchase my car in Bitcoin, or I'm not going to go out and purchase a house in Bitcoin. And one of the things that we had talked about before too, and I'm going to steal it, I'm sorry, but we had talked about how, like, there are places that accept cryptocurrency as a valid form of payment, but a lot of times what you're doing is you're taking your Bitcoin, or you're taking your Dogecoin or your Dictator coin, and you're converting it back to the US dollar, which raises the question, as the average consumer, like, why do I need to reinvent the wheel? Like, what is the purpose of me trying to come up with another currency and just making the market all that more confusing? Because at the end of the day, we are ultimately turning this back into the US dollar. When I bought my, super fancy gaming computer, I didn't buy it in Dogecoin. I bought it with money, with a dollar. So again, as the average consumer, and this was I think this was the question you wanted me to ask before. So as the average consumer, at least in my view, obviously there are sketchy things that are happening with cryptocurrency. And I should also say too, that I understand that this isn't exclusive to cryptocurrency. People have been doing sketchy things with money long before cryptocurrency was ever a thought in our minds, right? But I feel like it's another way to cover up sketchy things that happen. Because for me as an average consumer, there's no reason for me necessarily to cover up what it is that I'm doing. I don't need a decentralized currency. I don't need a way to cover up my trail, because I'm a good law-abiding citizen. I go out, I take my wife to dinner, I buy too many video games, and that's kind of it, right? So what are your thoughts on that, Jason? Like, what do you think the benefit is to cryptocurrency, and why do you think the average consumer should start investing?
Well, I mean, I'll start by, publicly stating that, like, realistically, the dollar is no different than anything else we just talked about, right? Like we invented currency because carrying those 18 sheep to get your thing of milk kind of became a pain in the butt after a while, right? So it definitely became a lot easier to, especially once people actually started working and not bartering for a living, it became a lot easier to basically create a token that somebody could give you in exchange for providing a value for them, working, and then you could use that token to obtain goods and services, right, and spend it. The US dollar, there's really not a lot of difference between that and Bitcoin, other than the fact that it's backed by the Fed, and in theory, in theory, in quotation marks, right, like the Fed and stuff insists like the value is there, but I mean, we've definitely seen a lot of cases where countries' currencies crumble, and hopefully that doesn't come to the US anytime soon, but there are no guarantees in this world. What I think, right, so part of the discussion we had earlier was a discussion around anonymity, right, where you had indicated that when I pulled this article up and showed it to you, that how did they do that, right? I thought Bitcoin was anonymous, and
That's right. Yes.
one of the tenets of Bitcoin, to my knowledge, was never to necessarily be anonymous, and what's happening here is that it's actually kind of the opposite of anonymous, right? So Bitcoin operates in what's called a public ledger, right? Like literally every computer, and I can tell you because currently that blockchain's tying up almost 500 gigs of space on my home computer. Every transaction ever made in the Bitcoin network is recorded, right? And you can go back and look forever at any transaction that ever happened. And the way these criminals are getting caught is they know the money was stolen. The money gets moved to another wallet, right? The feds and whoever they keep track of that wallet. They keep track of all of the money that leaves that wallet, where it goes. They keep track of the wallets it ends up in. And you can play some shell games to try to move it around, but eventually you're going to have to barter the contents of that wallet for a good or service. And whether or not that actually directly goes through US dollar to get there, some places do, some places don't. But in the end, you are bartering. And once you enter the realm of physical goods and services that a physical person gives to you, if that physical person is in the US, they are now beholden to US law, and it becomes possible to identify who you are. There are currencies such as Monero that use like pseudo-anonymized transactions that make that a lot harder. But with Bitcoin, that was never really a goal. The argument I would make there is that we've gotten to the point now where, man, having a public record, I think it's not necessarily a terrible thing. I'm a huge fan of transparency, right? And when you start to see, when you start to be able to shine a light in the dark corners where some of these shady transactions happen because it's all happening in a public ledger, right? You start to be able to chase where the money goes, and you start to be able to do good as a result of that. And I think that's really powerful. And
what actually does almost the opposite of that, right? So as I was saying that, we're decentralizing and making it untraceable, what's actually happening with these legitimate coins is that it's easier to trace, and it's actually putting people in a position to where they're being held accountable.
It's very easy to trace. It can be hard to track, right? Because you got to take it back to a person. So you have to figure out who owns the wallet or track back to it. But it makes life, easier, right? If you have, say, you're donating to a charity, right? And so you just send money to the wallet. Well, now you can look where that wallet sends money. And so you can directly see essentially how that charity is spending that Bitcoin, assuming it all happens in the Bitcoin ecosystem. It wouldn't, right? At some point or another, you'd see it go to an exchange so somebody could withdraw money, and then you're like, okay, well, they just turned it into money, and now I don't know what they're doing with it. But I mean, I think it's really powerful, and I think there's a lot of good uses for it. I don't think Web3 is one of them yet. That's like, well, we could go on a tangent here. We've only got 12 minutes left to the top of the hour, so we're not going to go into that tangent. So what do you think we move into our predictions here?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start by telling a story. So my wife and I this last year went. By the way, we are like coffee addicts, and there's something that they do in Toledo called Coffee Quest, which we were big fans of. So this year they started Coffee Quest back up, and we drove down to BG to a coffee shop that I can't name. I wish I could. But we went down, we got our coffee, and we walked out the front door of this place. And here in front of us was this big box with 6 wheels on it, and it was just strolling down the sidewalk, and it had this little orange flag on the back. And we said, what the hell is that? So of course we pull our phones out, we're taking pictures, and we're Googling, like, what is this little delivery robot? And come to find out, it's delivering food, right? It's delivering food to people in the area and students at their dorms. And it's a new way for restaurants to get their food to people if they don't want to come through the front door. Um, I, we're also seeing now like Tesla is coming out with their fully self-driving cars, which, is just absolutely insane to me. And this year, again, during the Super Bowl, we're seeing all of these other major car manufacturers creating electric self-driving cars. And then there's, like I talked about before, the buzz of the metaverse. Back in 2000, chat rooms were the cool thing. And now, the metaverse is like chat 2.0. You can put a VR headset on and you actually, like, right in front of you, go to an actual room where you're talking with actual people. And it's this whole new world that you're in. Right. So I say all of those things because, one, I'm a young guy, I'm 28, but I say that to then tell you this. I feel like we're living in the future right now. It is insane to me. Even at my young, I feel like an old man. I feel like an old crotchety old man talking about this stuff because it's blowing my mind, the things that technology that we've accomplished with technology.
What
We're
I really want to
entering.
know is what were you doing in chat rooms when you were 6?
Well, it was a little bit later. I was in MSN. I was in MSN and AIM when I was in middle school. So like
Okay.
2006 more. So I was in the age. I was still there. I promise. I was there. Um, so all of that to be said, to kind of dial it back to our space. We're entering into what is notably one of the most interesting times in technology. And we're talking about all these different vulnerabilities that come out in the metaverse and the blockchain and crypto and NFTs and all of this. It's time that we actually start taking security seriously, I think. And I think it shows the value of the service that we offer to our clients, right? That if we're putting our finances and our property into these web-based services, I think it's time that we start to take it seriously and start adopting proper practices to protect us from these very real, very imminent threats that exist in this space. Again, I'm 28 years old, and I went from the chat rooms to now we're in the metaverse, right? What does the next 5 years hold? What does the next 10 years hold? And if the trend continues to go up like this, technology is going to skyrocket, and we're going to have to learn to take it seriously and start implementing proper security practices, which I think Jason can speak much more intelligently and fluently than I can. But yeah, those are my thoughts. The point there is that we need to take it seriously. That's it. That's my soapbox platform, big idea that I want to get across.
So, I mean, I'm going to come out and say it that I'm really active in the MSP vendor space, and I've spent, I don't know, the past 18 months, at least the last year, probably between the last year and 2 years, punching up. Right. So I've been taking pretty large swings at the vendors in our space, as the managed service space, to ensure that they're doing what I feel and the community feels is best effort in attempting to secure the tools that we use to service our clients. Right. Because we can, at the end of the day, we are beholden to them to produce quality tools that are secure. And I can do everything right in my space, and I can have a really good security program, a really good practice. And because of a vendor I use that's got a legacy 20-year code base with a bunch of security holes in it, like, it can be a bad day for me and every one of my clients, right? So, but I just sat on a webinar yesterday with Huntress in our space, and we had, I don't know, 8 vendors. I moderated a panel. Got kind of spicy. I was asking the hard questions of the vendors, and I'll say the vendors, I feel like they're starting to get it. They're starting to take it a little more seriously and starting to realize that at some point or another, it's going to cost them clients if they don't do it. Part of the reason there is that insurance is getting more difficult to get. One of my direct predictions is this year will be the year that some number of low maturity security wise companies become uninsurable in the cyberspace. Not that they necessarily would have carried it, but we're already seeing We're already seeing insurance carriers require at minimum MFA on all external email access with some multi-factor authentication and offsite backups because business email compromise and ransomware are the two biggest things driving insurance carriers to pay out. In multi-factor authentication on email very effectively neuters 85-95% of business email compromise because you don't have that second factor, right? So there's a lot more social piece involved in attempting to get it to actually act on it. And offsite backups really hamper a company's ability to ransom you. Not to say that they're not going to steal your data and extort you instead, which is a growing concern. But we're starting to see insurance companies just literally not be willing to write you a cyber policy if you don't have those two things. In our space, in the MSP space, our costs are they're doubling for less coverage. So I suspect this year will be the year we start to see that really solidify, and we start to see those insurance vendors realize that they need to look at the risk rating seriously to continue making money in our space. And then the last one, and it's related. I honestly think this is the year of regulation in our space, and it makes me super sad to say that. I'm going to come out and say, and this is one we can check against if we do this next year. I'm expecting to see regulation in 10 states this year. We've got Louisiana that's already put some stuff in place. I know there are at least three to five more that have something in front of their state congresses or state legislative branches. And I suspect we'll see potentially, I'm going to say 10. And I think we'll see at least 25 before we start to see anything notably happen at the federal level. They'll let the states sort out what kind of makes sense. And then once we start hitting a critical mass, you'll start to see some of that move upstream to the federal level. But those are my predictions. So do we have any questions from the audience? We got about 4 minutes left.
Hop in the chat here.
Yeah, I don't expect any. This isn't really a format that lends itself to Q&A very much. So give it about another 30 seconds here.
Well, I'm excited to look back next year at our predictions. I mean, we are definitely at a turning point right now where we're not going to be given a choice. Like, we have to take security seriously, and what used to be optional for small business is becoming the new norm, and we're going to have to start adopting these things regardless of whether or not we want to, if we want our businesses to continue to grow and thrive.
I'm still not seeing anything, so I'm going to go ahead and end this. And so, thanks everyone for attending today. If you didn't catch it or only caught part of it, we'll make the recording available on YouTube or Zoom or somewhere. We'll figure out how to do it. I did record it all. So thank you, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.